welcome to another episode of the LOC Fantasy Show. We're back again for our second episode, and you can see we successfully made it one episode when we were both available, but it's okay. Solo podcasts are not going to be a regular thing. I am just going to do a one solo show today for you for the recap of week one. Today we're also going to give you the waiver preview as well, who you should hit up on your waiver wires. We'll swing back and see which of mine and Chris's Kings and Paupers team on the week one. We'll take a look at the Thursday night preview, and then we'll finish off with a little bit of fun like we always like to try and do. Yeah, without further ado, let's just get straight into the recaps. So just generally as a comment, it was great to have the NFL back, obviously. It's a long time between seasons. It was a great week one as well. There were some awesome games, some not so awesome games. We even got a kickoff touchdown return from the new kickoff rules, so that was cool. But the important thing to remember, certainly when it comes to a fantasy perspective, is to not overreact to week one. Week one, especially nowadays, where there's only the 3 preseason games, is almost like another preseason games. Teams are still settling in. They're still a little bit sloppy. They've not necessarily even played that much, the starters, during the summer. So don't get too hyped if it went well. Obviously pleased for you if it did. But don't get too carried away. Don't go thinking you're going to go 14-0 in the regular season and all this jazz. And equally, don't be too bummed if you had a bit of a rough week. Fantasy points aren't everything. They aren't the entire picture. Usage and trends and analysis and all that will tell you that the underlying metrics can be good. Fantasy points can be somewhat random. Certainly touchdowns are a bit more of a random stat, but even obviously to a degree, yardage, you can have big plays and whatnot. But that being said, we obviously did learn some things during the week. So we're going to go through quickly game by game and just give a general recap. We recognised that the previews was quite a long episode, so we're going to work on that equally within these recaps. We're going to try and make them quite punchy. We're not going to talk about stuff that was just run of the mill. We're only going to talk about interesting discussion points here to give you more food for thought or a different opinion. So let's start off with the first game of the week, Kansas City against Baltimore. The Chiefs won this one 27-20. It was a great opening game, wasn't it? We're definitely seeing 2 playoff teams here go down to the wire right at the end, with likely his foot just being on the white of the sideline there, preventing a potential game winning if they went for the 2 points, or even maybe going to overtime. But some interesting things from a fantasy perspective in this game. Xavier Worthy, he looks like lightning. We've got to remember that Hollywood Brown obviously didn't play in this game. He's going to come back and muddy the picture still, but to be honest, he did a lot of his damage on a handful of plays. He's going to be that kind of player. I think that he doesn't necessarily need a lot of plays to pay off your fantasy day. Yes, he's going to be a bit boom and bust. It's not going to be reliable, but I think you could probably bank on him as at least a flex option week in, week out. From what I saw with the Chiefs, you're going to want a slice of this offense. If a player only needs a couple of touches or what have you to do their damage on the ball, that's the kind of player you want in your fantasy team. Derrick Henry scored his first touchdown as a Raven. It was a bit subpar, but the game script worked against him a bit. I wouldn't be too worried there. I would be a bit more worried about Travis Kelce. It seems like to me he's no longer the focal point of this team. I don't think it's necessarily age-related, although that's obviously certainly a factor. I just think now that they've kind of reloaded the cupboard after Tyreek Hill obviously left, Mahomes has the players to spread the ball around to that he hasn't had in the last few seasons. I don't think they're going to try and be quite as reliant on Kelce as they have done in the past. In fact, in this one, Noah Gray, I think, ended up with basically the same amount of yards as Kelce. Again, that's not going to happen every week, and Kelce is absolutely still going to have great weeks. But yeah, I don't think it's a situation anymore where he's going to be the unquestioned best tight end, because the Chiefs are going to spread it. If there wasn't enough testament to that, Juju even nearly caught a touchdown despite only being back with the team a few weeks. But I think this is very much what we're going to see from this Chiefs team. Not fantasy relevant, you may have seen that Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, tried to call a timeout, which he's not allowed to do. Despite some conspiracy theorists online, Andy Reid did actually call the timeout instead of him. But he didn't break any rules. But apparently, even if he did call it and the ref granted it. There was no rule against it. The refs are just meant to ignore him. So anyway, but yeah, buy all your Chiefs because they're all going to be involved. Like I say, week to week, it's going to be maybe a bit hard to predict, but you certainly want a piece of this offense. Mahomes is obviously going to have these kinds of games as well. He's had a lot of these kind of games really over the last few years. It's not because obviously he's a bad quarterback. Slightly it's bad for fantasy, obviously we see, but he's absolutely going to pop up with these games where he gets like 4 touchdowns and things still. So if your baseline is what he did this week, don't worry, because you're just looking for a quarterback not to let you down, and he will absolutely win you weeks. Isaiah Likely obviously had a big touchdown, and he nearly got the game winner. He was targeted twice on that final drive by the Ravens. He would just be amazingly reliably good, obviously, if he wasn't playing behind Mark Andrews, who the Chiefs really did try to take away, him and Zay Flowers. But I still think he could get himself in the conversation of being, certainly if you're a tight end, like that forces you to start a tight end, a week in, week out starter, because this Ravens team just seems to be crying out for another option behind Flowers and Andrews, and Likely, he looks great. We typically see tight ends mature when they come into the league quite young. They're not typically ready, they're not as effective when they've got a few years on them. Kelsey again is a great example. When he got to 27, I think is when he had his first big season. Isaiah Likely is still only 24, so I think he could absolutely step up and become another option in this Ravens offense. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. We'll come back to him on the waivers, but definitely someone you should be looking to add to your team. I think even if he doesn't overtake Andrews, which I don't think he probably will, and Andrews is going to do better. By the way, he had quite a quiet day in terms of the fantasy points. There was no fantasy points. We're going to start having some rain metrics because we're British, we like rain, obviously, make it rain and points and all that. But it was a beautiful summer's day with Mark Andrews on the field. Unfortunately, in this one, not much points at all, not a drop of rain to be seen, unfortunately, really. P. Ryan, he isn't a threat to Pacheco at the moment, but it wouldn't surprise me to see his role grow where he's just joined the team. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. But again, I still think Pacheco's going to be fine. P. Ryan may into his workload, that wouldn't surprise me. P. Ryan could possibly find some value on his own at some point in time, but for now it's Pacheco's backfield. So that was pretty much everything from that game. So we'll go on to Green Bay against Philadelphia, which was obviously in Brazil. 34-29 to the Eagles. I think by all things considered for the NFL, the first game in Brazil was a success, other than the field, which, obviously wasn't great at times. There were some awful interceptions in this game as well by both quarterbacks, but obviously, you kind of take that with these guys, that they'll throw some bad picks, but hey, they'll make some great plays as well, and obviously for fantasy, that's what you want too. But yeah, the big thing from this game is obviously the Green Bay outlook absolutely all hinges on Jordan Love. Now, I'm not worried about Josh Jacobs. He's obviously going to be better with Love there, but he's just going to dominate this backfield. They're going to rely on him more for as long as Love is out. So I don't have a worry with him. The receivers, however, I don't think you can really count on any of them for as long as Love is out. Talking season long, Reed is absolutely explosive. I mean, he just looked amazing, and he looked so good. We mentioned we're going to have League of Champions candidates and League of Donkey candidates each week. Well, come on in, Jaden Reed. You are the first candidate for the League of Champions because that was just a phenomenal game by him. Nearly 30 points in I think standard scoring, obviously even more in PPI. Just had a brilliant day, but yeah, he needs Love back, otherwise he's not going to repeat this. And hey, our first League of Champion candidate in a Brazil game, first and possibly only for maybe a long time. So well done, Jaden Reed. In terms of the other guys, in terms of season long for when Love is back, Dobbs could be good for PPR. He was seemingly the top receiver in terms of involvement and routes run and things like that. But he's not going to be someone that's, going to pile up the points really. Again, Watson, he's going to be just one of those boom bust guys. I don't think you can really count on him week on week. When the matchup's right, he'll be good enough. But yeah, and Wicks, he's just not relevant. So I wouldn't spend too much time thinking about him. For Philly, it's pretty much as you were. Everyone kind of did what they expected. Godot was sort of the only offensive guy who didn't really do anything, but I sort of said in the preview I didn't really rate him too much for this one anyway. So yeah, nothing more to say there. So we'll go on to Pittsburgh against Atlanta. It was 18-10 to the Steelers. They won with 6 field goals. Have a day, Chris Boswell. But this takeaway I took from this one is that the Steelers offense is going to be painful and slow. Obviously, they didn't have Russell Wilson in this one. It looks like he's not going to play next week either with his calf injury. Fields could grow into the role, but yeah, it's just, I don't know, with Arthur Smith and stuff, I was cautiously optimistic, certainly about this running game for the Steelers, that they could actually be decent, but I don't know. I didn't love what I saw, really. Harris is going to have value because seemingly he's going to dominate the backfield. Pickens will be okay as well. Certainly if you're in PPR, maybe Frymouth now and then, but to be honest, beyond that, I'm out. I know Jalen Warren, he was coming back from his hamstring injury. He may have had a reduced role in week 1. In fact, I saw a report pop up a second ago that he is something suggesting that maybe he's not fully healthy, which would seem to support, obviously his output on the day. But you know, they're probably going to mix in Cordero Patterson as well. I don't know. It's just, I'm not too hot on this Steelers offense. For the Falcons, I wouldn't panic with this one. Look, Kirk is shaking off the rust. He's obviously coming back from that Achilles tear. Don't panic on the bad performances. I think we need to give them a mulligan and see them get up and running. Beyond that, again, I don't really have anything else more to add to this one, so we'll go on to Arizona against Buffalo. It was 34-28 to the Bills. Interesting game. Cards took a fairly sizable early lead, and then the Bills came back and took the lead. I think this game confirmed that Josh Allen very much is still a great quarterback one. Again, still not convinced he can, necessarily be QB1 or perhaps not even top 3. He's definitely not going to play the Cardinals defense every week, which obviously helped him this week. In fact, he really did drop the points. The points were absolutely raining in this one by Josh Allen. And the crazy thing was, he did it pretty much all on his own. The skill position guys in this game didn't do a great deal. Shakir got a touchdown, but only 3 catches. James Cook again, he got some yards, but no touchdown. Dalton Kincaid was very, very quiet. Josh Allen rushed in 2 touchdowns himself. But I think the Bills, are going to want to scale back this running because he already hurt his wrist, and this has been a talking point for years with Josh Allen now, that they want to scale it back and want him obviously to play the healthy in the whole season. So I think they're going to do that. I don't know how, I'm still not entirely convinced on the talent around him, but that they'll get going. And obviously when they face better defenses, even as early as this week, as we'll come to in the preview in a bit, it's going to be a bit more difficult, but Allen's still going to be absolutely fine. And again, I would expect the other guys to pick it up and be a bit better as well. On the other side of the ball for the Cardinals, I would say mostly as expected, probably, except for Marvin Harrison Jr., who was very quiet on the day. There was a big touchdown opportunity that he could have had, which would have significantly changed the outlook on the day, but it didn't come down with it. Again, I think he'll come good. He's just so talented. Stick with him. It was a bad day. It may take more than one game for him to get up and running, but better days are ahead for him. Connor looked good. Kyler Murray looked fairly good as well. So, yeah. Next game, Tennessee against Chicago, 24-17. Oh boy, there was some absolutely rough quarterback play in this one. Tough sledding for Caleb Williams in his rookie start. Will Levis didn't look particularly good either. We'll start off with Rome Odunze. He's getting an MRI, seemingly injured his knee, I believe it was, in this one. So he'll probably be slated to miss some time. Keep a hold of him if he's on your team, but he's probably not going to be on the field for a little bit, I would imagine. This does consolidate the receiving core a little bit as well, which is quite nice for you DJ Moore and Keenan Allen owners out there. I think that they'll certainly be usable, especially when Caleb gets going a bit more. Caleb, he will come good. It just may take a bit of time. We need to remember that this Bears offensive line isn't the best around either. And it's a rookie adjusting to the NFL, especially it's his first start as well. But yeah, didn't even throw for 100 yards on nearly 30 pass attempts, so that was not so good. But DJ Moore still didn't have the worst of days. He got to 50 yards, I believe, 5 catches Keenan Allen was actually targeted the most as well, so that was good to see as well. Over to the Titans side of the ball, Levis, he's definitely going to have his highs and lows. We'll be hoping this was one of his low games, because if he keeps playing like he did, I tell you, I don't think he's going to be starting the entire season here. Pollard, he seems to be pretty good value. That they kind of did come out and say after the game that they want to even this backfield up a little bit more, because he got 16 carries to Spears' 4. Personally, I was a bit higher on Spears, I think, coming into the season, because I saw him play in London last year especially, but he just looked electric. He's really athletic, but we need to remember that Pollard obviously did start for the Cowboys for the last few years. He did put some really good play on tape. He was injured much of last year, which made everyone kind of sour on him, so now that he seems a bit healthier, he looks good. I wouldn't be entirely convinced that this sort of just wasn't coach speak. I think if Pollard can prove that he can pound the rock, like he did in this one, that they'll probably give him the lion's share of the carries. So I'd be quite happy if I was a Pollard owner right now, and conversely maybe a little bit worried if I had Tajay Spears. What else? Hopkins, he obviously came back from injury, didn't really do a great deal in this one, and to be honest, even when he's fully healthy, I don't know. It's not looking good if you're DeAndre Hopkins owner at the moment, to be honest. Calvin Ridley, again, given it's week 1 and Levis didn't have a great day, I'm willing to have a mulligan on him. But he may be the only usable receiver here for Tennessee. So we'll go to New England against Cincinnati now. You know what, New England? You know what? Have one of these. Absolutely just a hilarious game. Give this Pats team credit, and obviously I am a Pats fan. The defense played great. Look, nobody questioned that this Patriots defense wasn't good still. It was all about the offense, and everyone just thought that would be a car crash, and the D obviously couldn't bail them out of it like they have done in years past with Bill Belichick. But the offense played with a fair bit of grit as well. But man, I mean, for as good as the Patriots did, this was ugly by the Bengals. They look terrible. I know they were out without T. Higgins, and obviously Jamar Chase has kind of been in and out of practice. Supposedly there's a bit of drama in the locker room with all the contract stuff as well, which should surprise no one, I suppose. I don't think this game ultimately really changes our view too much on either of these teams, though. For the Patriots, maybe they're not going to be a complete car crash. I think that there was an element of the Bengals just didn't seem ready, but maybe they're not going to be as bad as people think. Stevenson, me and Chris were both down on him last week. I still think he's sort of just a volume player. I think he kind of, in a good matchup, he's going to be fine like he was in this one. But I certainly wouldn't be expecting this every week from him. Again, beyond that on the Patriots, there is nothing of fantasy relevance. For the Bengals, they're going to bounce back. They're going to get going. They do typically start quite slow. But until that time, unfortunately, Joe Burrow, you are the League of Donkey entrant of the week. Because that was terrible. I mean, it's not so much that the performance wasn't that great. It's the absolute expectation that the Bengals were just going to steamroll the Patriots, and this is what the Bengals came out and did. Ugly. So you are the candidate of week 1 for the League of Donkeys, unfortunately, Joe Burrow. Chase wasn't too bad, again, thrust into the role. Obviously, Higgins did miss this game with the hamstring injury, so we'll have to see. It could be a multi-week injury. Hamstrings are a bit funny, and he's becoming a bit of an injury-prone guy, which is a bit of a worry. When we're looking at the running backs, this appears to be Moss's backfield. He got more carries on the day, 9 to Chase Brown's 4. He also got the touchdown. So for now, he did seem to pass the eye test as well. So I'd say, again, I'd be quite happy if I was a Zach Moss owner here, and I'd be a bit concerned if I was a Chase Brown owner. We need to see how they look in a better day when the offense is up and running. It's way too early to throw in the towel on Chase Brown yet, but if we kind of see this again next week, and when they do get up and running and the involvement's still kind of the same as it is, then he may be on your waiver wire sooner rather than later, unfortunately. We also have Houston against Indianapolis. This was a great divisional bout between these two. Ended 29-27 to the Texans. Really exciting game. It was basically everything we thought. we would see and everything we wanted to see, more importantly. Joe Mixon, he overperformed. In fact, he would have been the other candidate for the League of Champions this week. 30 carries, huge workload. He could be a bona fide RB1. Forget what we were saying last week. It was, is he on the RB2, back-end RB1 borderline? They're seemingly going to want to run this offense through him. He looks fresh, he looks spry. He could be really good. He could be really good. So you should be very happy right now if you've got Joe Mixon. Tank Dell wasn't so involved. Nico Collins had a decent day yardage wise, and Stephon Diggs grabbed the 2 touchdowns. We said these guys aren't all gonna hit each and every week. One of them's probably gonna miss out. It's more likely mostly gonna be between one of Dell and Diggs. It was Dell's turn this week, but don't panic too much. Better days are ahead. This is, however, everything we were worried about for Michael Pittman, because we thought that being the lead receiver, it would kind of help, but the type of play Anthony Richardson has, where he likes the deep ball a bit more, the water was not flowing, the rain was not flowing really so much for Michael Pittman this week. 4 catches for 31 yards. Worse so, Alec Pierce, he had 3 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown. Anthony Richardson only completed 9 passes in this one, and this is what makes the Indianapolis receiving corps really tricky, because Indy were losing, I think, for most of this game. He's only thrown 19 passes, completed 9. That's extremely low volume. Guys like Pittman it's not their bread and butter to make the big plays. That's more like the Alec Pierce, Ashton Dulin players here. So it's a bit of a worry for him. But again, if you're looking to play these guys each week, absolutely good luck on picking the one that's going to have a good game. I would add Alec Pierce just because, he's kind of like Jaden Reed and Xavier Worthy. He's not necessarily going to lead a lot of plays to pay off a particular week. If he doesn't get them, he's obviously going to have a low score. But when he hits, it's going to be a nice addition to your team. But Anthony Richardson looks great. Hopefully he can stay healthy this year. If you got him sort of in the mid-rounds of your draft, you should feel really happy about that. Josh Downs didn't play this game as well, so he'll be back. But again, I don't know how much really he'll add. If anything, he'll probably just sort of take away from what's already there. Jonathan Taylor did okay here as well. Jacksonville against Miami, so that was 2017 to the Dolphins. Again, it was a good game, but it was a bit of a weird one. Definitely not the boat race that we sort of expected here. It was felt a bit sloppy. Very much had a feeling of 2 teams that weren't necessarily fully ready for the season. It was awfully hot, as you can imagine, September in Miami as well, even though these teams are both from Florida, so that could have potentially played a role as well. Again, in terms of other bizarre things going on, Tyreek Hill was arrested before the start of the game. Just amazing when that report came through. You don't think you ever see stuff like that. I mean, I've played fantasy for 16 years. I've got Tyreek Hill on my team in my league record. I've never had anything like that happen before. So very bizarre, but he did play the game. And he had a good day at the office as well. From the Miami side, Devon Achane dominated this backfield, which was quite interesting. So it will be interesting to see if this usage holds up week to week, because obviously last year both him and Mostert had some value, and Mostert was very much an afterthought in this one. He didn't look particularly good as well. Supposedly he played with a chest injury though. So that may have played a role to a degree. Looking at the other backfield, Tank Bigsby, the usage was interesting there for the Jags as well. He got as many carries as Travis Etienne did, and he actually got 30 more yards basically. Didn't get the touchdown that Etienne got, so this could be a bit more of a split backfield than we think. Etienne, as I said, did get the touchdown, so he should still have the goal line work, but he did also have a fumble. So it's definitely one to monitor. As it comes to the receiving room for the Jags, Evan Ingram again was just another player in a long list of tight ends that did not have a good fantasy day here in week 1. The rest of the receiving room, it's again, I don't know how much we've learned here, because Gabe Davis led the team in yardage with 62. Brian Thomas caught the touchdown with 4 grabs for 47 yards. Christian Kirk only had 30 yards, but the usage and his involvement was fairly good still. So I would still think it's probably Christian Kirk and maybe Brian Thomas as well, the two receivers you want to own there. But yeah, it's obviously has the potential to rotate there a bit. Carolina against New Orleans, 47-10. Hard really to know what to take away from this game. Absolute drubbing of the Panthers by the Saints here. The Panthers were just dreadful. They look terrible. And when they look terrible, it's then very hard to do an analysis of what's going on the other side, because the Saints offense, the Saints team last year wasn't particularly great. They obviously absolutely trounced them here. How much was this, being a new offense with Clint Kubiak running the helm, new year, new team potentially, and how much this was just the opponent was just that bad? Tough to know. Bryce Young, he still looked like a bust in this one. He was just missing throws all over the place, threw a couple of picks. Just was not a pretty performance. Kamara, and there's nothing really I'd be interested in on the Panthers side of the ball at the moment, to be quite honest with you. Deontay Johnson may have some value at some point, but yeah, good luck if Young's going to play like this. Kamara, that was interesting. So he had a pretty solid day, 15 carries, 83 yards and a touchdown. Led the backfield, obviously got involved a little bit in the receiving game there as well. So yeah, a good start for him. Olave was obviously quite quiet in this one. Rashid Shaheed got the long touchdown, and a couple of the tight ends caught a touchdown as well. Again, don't panic on him. I think it was just a case of, the Saints were doing whatever they wanted. They were up pretty early. He wasn't involved. When you kind of have a blowout game, it just happens that if your players don't get involved early, then they're not necessarily involved as the game goes on. He will have better days, although it might not be next week, where he faces Diggs, who just absolutely erased Amari Cooper. But yeah, Kubiak could make this function offense. Taysom Hill's usage was quite interesting as well until late in the game. He was sort of the second running back ahead of Jamal Williams. I think there was a point where he nearly got a touchdown as well, where he got a rush around the goal line or something, I think. So yeah, keep an eye on him if you've obviously got him on your team. Minnesota against New York Giants, 28-6 to the Vikings. And yeah, I officially am not touching any Giants this year. Forget about it. Daniel Jones looked terrible. This Vikings defense is supposedly attackable. Should have been a good, layup sort of easy start to the season for the Giants, and Daniel Jones looked awful. I know it was his first game back from his ACL tear, but yeah, I mean, the fact that Brian Daboll's already had to come out and confirm whether or not Daniel Jones would be starting in week 2, which he will be, by the way, I think that kind of tells you where the Giants are right now, and specifically where Daniel Jones is. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them bench him at some point for Drew Lock or potentially even Tommy DeVito. I don't think there's any really useful fantasy asset here for the Giants. Malik Neighbors, if you've got him, power to you. I suppose he was okay for PPR this week with 5 catches for 66 yards. But yeah, I'd be looking to sell him, to be quite honest, if you can probably get anything fairly reasonable back for him. On the other side of the board for the Vikings, Sam Darnold seemed to look quite good in this one. Had a good completion percentage, 2 touchdowns. Again, I think we need to see him do it against more stiff opposition to before we fully believe that Kevin O'Connell can maximize his potential. But yeah, he looked reasonable enough in this one. Justin Jefferson gets a touchdown. Jordan Addison has an ankle injury, so that's going to be one to check. We'll come back on hopefully later in the week. It wasn't the injury that he was already dealing with, it's to his other ankle now as well. But he needs Darnold to basically play at this level to be good to I think really have any relevance anyway. Anything else in this game? Hawkinson, he's probably at least another month or 2 away. I think it's around 6-7 weeks is sort of the timeline I've seen. If you've got a reserve spot in your league, you should probably go ahead and stash him if you can. But other than that, yeah, I wouldn't give too much concern to him. On our next game, we've got the Raiders against the Chargers. This one went 22-10 to the Chargers. This was a fairly curious game, I thought. The Chargers seemingly passed the eye test here. Although I'm not entirely concerned that the Raiders didn't sort of just give this game to them in a way. It was competitive in the first half, but then, yeah, the Chargers kind of just sort of ran away with it there in the second half. J.K. Dobbins is the real highlight from the Chargers side of the board, and I'm going to give J.K. Dobbins a little love here, and especially you at home, because if you took him late in your fantasy draft, boy, for as long as he stays healthy, because the dude cannot stay healthy, but we obviously hope he does, he could be really good. He looked so much better than Gus Edwards. 10 carries, 135 yards and a touchdown. Lovely day. So yeah, you got an absolute steal, and he plays the Panthers next week, by the way. So that was great. It's going to be a split backfield still. He's not going to dominate the work, but the amount they're probably going to run, it shouldn't matter. Passing game was quite underwhelming. McConkey caught a touchdown, but yeah, I don't think you're really going to be able to bankably rely on anyone in this receiving game. For the Raiders, yeah, ugly. I don't really know on this one. Minshew didn't play particularly well. That's a bit of a worry if you're a Devontae Adams or Brock Bowers owner. Brock Bowers, I thought, did quite well, all things considered. Devontae Adams could be better, but yeah, interesting. The running backs, though, quite a worry here if you're a Zamir White owner, because yeah, you saw Alexander Mattison go in with a receiving touchdown, and he appears to be the one getting the passing down work. A lot of Zamir White's value was based on him basically being the volume play, the 3-down back, getting the receiving work as well. So if they're going to split this backfield a bit more evenly with Alexander Mattison getting the receiving work, I'm not really sure how usable either of these are going to be outside of positive matchups. So and just generally this offense could be pretty rough too. So Denver against Seattle, 26-20 to the Seahawks. Kenneth Walker III had a great game, although he did pick up a abdomen injury near the end of the game. So check that one out during the week. Hopefully he'll be fine for the weekend. The Hawks did win this one. It was a bit rusty, I think, from the offense. The offense gave up, I think it was at least 2 or 3 safeties. It was interesting, or they gave up 2 and tried to give up a third. But I think they will get better here. The death of Tyler Lockett seems to have been greatly exaggerated, because he led the Seahawks in catches, yards, and targets in this one. So myself and Chris were sort of Jackson Smith and Jigba truthers here, but I think, yeah, maybe Tyler Lockett's going to be good this year after all. DK Metcalf will definitely be better. He just got shut down by Patrick Surtain, so we did kind of warn that could potentially happen, so don't worry too much there. Denver is both underwhelming and very spread out. I think Chris put it the best when we were watching the games together on the weekend, that every single position on offense or every player on offense that they have is just bang average, and I think that's a fair assessment. And when you have a lot of bang average players, it obviously gets spread among them, and they're all bang average. And if you average squared, I suppose, for fantasy, that's not really what you want. So yeah, I don't really know if anyone in this Broncos team has any value that you can bank on each week, to be quite honest. So we'll move swiftly along. Washington against Tampa Bay, 37-20 Bucks. This was a spicy game. The Bucks picking up where they left off last year. Baker was baking. Godwin is back too, I think. Obviously Mike Evans was great, but yeah, it was good to see. Chris Godwin get more involved. He could be a usable asset potentially again this year. Rashad White was horribly inefficient. He only averaged 2 yards a carry on 15 carries. More worryingly, Bucky Irvin looked pretty good. So again, similar to Zamar White, a lot of Rashad White's value last year came from him absolutely dominating the work, and fantasy-wise, he still had an okay score in this one. But if he's going to continue rushing the ball like that, and Bucky Irving's here, yeah, it's going to be a bit more of a split backfield, and it's going to take a fair bit of value away from him. Jaden Daniels, he is going to be solid for fantasy. He had a lovely old day. He absolutely needs to learn to slide, otherwise he's not going to play 17 games. But yeah, I think as long as you've got him in fantasy, just play him, because he's got value with his legs. He was reasonably good passing the ball there as well. Narrowly missed on a connection with Terry McLaurin for a long touchdown. Brian Robinson, he's going to be great as well. I was quite a Brian Robinson fan later in the draft. So he looked good in this one too, just a really good player. Terry McLaurin, he had a bit of a disappointing day, but yeah, he'll definitely be better in the games to come there as well. The Rams against Detroit on Sunday Night Football. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I think I may have... did I skip a game here? Yeah, I skipped a game. We'll ping back to the Cowboys and the Browns. Sorry, I don't know how I skipped over that one. So this one was 33-17 to the Cowboys. Question for you, dear listeners. Please write in with your responses. What was worse, Deshaun Watson or Brady's commentating? It was, of course, absolutely Deshaun Watson, definitively. Brady will get better. I'm not really sure you can say the same for Deshaun Watson. That was terrible. Now, granted, he's not going to play the Cowboys D every week, but he just looked pretty cooked, to be honest. When you look at him throw the ball, the defining trait, I think, when you watch a quarterback play, someone, whatever level, they just have a zip, a jump. The ball jumps out their hand. The velocity that they have on their throws, it's just something that you seemingly either have it or you don't. Deshaun Watson did have it. It doesn't look like he has it anymore. So that's a big worry. He's not really a guy I think you were thinking about playing a quarterback anyway. Yeah, he didn't look good. Amari Cooper, he's going to have better days, but again, similar to Neighbours, if there's someone out there who's going to give you some reasonably fair value player for Amari Cooper, I'd probably be looking to trade him. He will definitely have better days. He just got erased by Trevon Diggs and this Cowboys defense, but I just don't want to be associated with a quarterback that isn't going to necessarily support him as well as some other quarterbacks potentially could. Ford should be fine. He is so long as Nick Chubb is out anyway. He got a touchdown in garbage time, but they'll probably look to be a bit more run heavy when they're in a better game script. So I think he'll be fine. David Njoku injured his high ankle sprain. I don't know if I'd say go ahead and drop him if you're in the Titan League, but depending what your bench situation is like, he's probably going to miss at least a few weeks of seeing that they're looking to sign a tight end, so that's seemingly a bad sign for his availability, so you're going to go ahead and need to have another option if you were looking at playing David Njoku. For the Cowboys, they don't really appear to have dropped a beat. Dak signed a big old extension before this one. He didn't really need to do a great deal in this one. For CD, again, he didn't have to do too much here, but he looked pretty good there too. The running backs, it was a bit meh. Ezekiel, he got 4 yards and a touchdown. He seems to be the leader of the backfield at this point, so I think he's the one with a bit more value. With Rico Dowdle, I think you're going to want to hold on to him, but again, he might be a guy that sort of hits the waiver wire if they're not changing this split or looking to get him more involved as the season goes on. Brandon Aubrey, have a day as well. My God, so many field goals. It's such a shame about that delay of game before that 66-yarder that he absolutely nailed. So I love me some Brandon Aubrey. We'll go to Sunday Night Football now with the Rams against Detroit, 26-20 to the Lions. This was an awesome game, really awesome game. Lions mostly as expected. David Montgomery was quite a bit busier than I think we thought. He actually led the backfield in carries, 17-11. He looked really good as well, but he is a great running back. So I think for now you can obviously rely on both of these. Again, it wouldn't surprise me as the season goes on a little bit that if Jahmyr Gibbs gets a bit more involved, it might just be related to him coming back from that hamstring injury that he suffered in the preseason, but they're both absolutely usable. Amon-Ra, obviously he had a bit of a disappointing day. It was I don't know what the weather was like in Detroit, but it was probably going by the British weather, absolutely no rain there, just a nice summer day. No rain at all, but he'll have better days, absolutely. Jameson Williams was the one that really popped in this one. But again, I don't think that's bankable. I think he could be better this season than he has been, but it was a one big play, and yes, he was a bit involved, but it was sort of at the expense of Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta, who will also have better days, I feel like. So it's going to even out a bit. For the Rams, Kyren is king. Forget about Blake Corum, drop him. I think he didn't get a single carry in this one. I'm not even sure if he was active, to be honest. Ronnie Rivers got 2 carries, so he certainly played ahead of him regardless, so Kyren's going to be fine. Puka Nacua was obviously the big piece of news in this game, re-injury of his knee. I was sort of worried about taking Nacua in fantasy with that knee injury, so it appears he's aggravated it. I believe he's already gone on IR as well, so he's guaranteed to miss the next 4 games. You're going to need another option. You might want to turn to Demarcus Robinson maybe as well, 2-2 out last year was quite good in the absence of Cup to start the season. In the meantime, Cooper Kupp's obviously going to absolutely eat, so congratulations to you if you managed to get him in your fantasy draft. And yeah, that's it for this one. And then the last game of the week, Monday Night Football, the Jets against San Francisco, 32-19 to the Niners. Obviously, the biggest thing in this one was Jordan Mason out absolutely nowhere. Christian McCaffrey leaves the fantasy world absolutely reeling. Because there was no indication that he wasn't going to play. Obviously, he was going to this one questionable. It was quite well reported that he had this calf issue, but it didn't sound serious enough that they would sit through this game. Not only that, it sounds like he might even sit next week as well. But in his place, Jordan Mason had a huge day. This could have defined so many matchups in fantasy. Those of you who would have been relying on CMC for a win, those of you playing against someone who obviously had CMC, who maybe even didn't see it or have time to change their team and get somebody else in, being the last game of the week, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place with the options available at that point. But yeah, Niners impressively taking care of business. They're looking like they're picking up right where they left off. Debo was good, obviously, not surprising when CMC is out. They typically get him a bit more involved in the run game. He obviously got a rushing touchdown in this one too. It gives him a bit more of that reliable workload. As we kind of said, not everyone on this team was going to eat. Ayuk had a quiet day. It's going to take him a week or two to ramp up, I think, with obviously where he was set out for so long, trying to get that contract. Kittle didn't do much either, and again, he'll have his days, so just stick with him. Purdy was fairly quiet in this one too. What else? A rough start for the Jets, but A-Rod should be able to make this offense go, make the team's assets relevant, something obviously Zach Wilson couldn't really do last year. He might not be fully back, he might not be peak A-Rod or what we think of A-Rod anymore, but he's certainly good enough. Don't read into Lazard too much. I know he caught the 2 touchdowns in this one, but obviously Mike Williams is still making his way back. Garrett Wilson was a bit quiet in this one too. It's just such a Rodgers thing to throw to Alan Lazard. He just loves his former Packers guys, doesn't he? Hey, you know what? He could have a bit of value, I suppose, but I wouldn't definitely don't back on him getting 89 yards and 2 touchdowns again. But yeah, so that is it for the recaps. We'll go ahead and look at mine and Chris's Kings and Paupers teams now. So we'll start off with our King teams from last week. So for me, my Kings, Jared Goff, he got 13.38. Jerome Ford got 12.9 points. So I had T. Higgins in my King team of the week, so I'm just going to go ahead and sub Chase in. I think that's fair enough. He only got 6.2 anyway, so not the best. I had Taysom Hill at tight end. He only got 2.9 points in standard scoring. Cameron Dicker got 12 points. That wasn't a bad call. And the Bengals D, obviously, they had a disappointing day. They only got 7 points according to our league of record scoring. So my Kings only got 54.38 on the week. Chris, he had Jalen Hurts in at quarterback. The Brazil Samba, he called it. He got 20.42 points. Pretty good day at the office. Running back, Kenneth Walker, 16.9 points. Again, solid. AJ Brown, he again pairing up with Hurts. He got 17.9 points. Unfortunately for Chris, the tight end, not so good. Pat Freiermuth, he only got 2.7. Greg Zuerlein as well. A measly 1 point in a week where so many kickers went for so many points. And the Bears D got 28 points. So that is a total of 86.92 for Chris's Kings. Much better than my 54.38. But we'll take a look at our peasants now, because we will deduct the points from our Kings of our peasants, as per our promise to you that we will try and give you good fantasy advice, and you can obviously follow who does better. So yeah, over to the peasants.
Ah, you filthy peasant.
So for my peasants, I had Brock Purdy. He only got 10.34 points, so I did pretty good there. Ramondre Stevenson, yeah, big old whiff on that one. I'm going to give myself one of these, actually, because he got 18.6. Yeah, we obviously thought that the Pats were going to get steamed. He had a very nice day in the end, so bad. Peasant pick by me. Amari Cooper, though, I nailed 1.6 points. George Kittle as well, he only got 4. Jake Elliott got 10, so that was actually a fairly reasonable day. And the Ravens D got 5, so I did pretty well there. So my peasants got 49.54 points in total, giving me a net score of 4.84 on the week, so at least I'm above 0. For Chris, he had Deshaun Watson as his peasant, and he got 12.66 points. He also had Ramondre Stevenson with 18.6. He picked Michael Pittman. He got 3.1, so that's good. Trent McBride, he only got 3 as well. Evan McPherson, he got 6 points. Not quite how Chris drew it up. Thinking he'd only get extra points, but it wasn't the best of scores, certainly compared to the field on the week. And he also picked the Patriots defense, but they had a really good day, obviously shutting down that Bengals team. So they got 16, which gives Chris a Peasants team score of 59.36 and a net overall score of 27.56. So congratulations to you, Chris. You win Kings and Peasants for week 1. I will note that down over my 4.84. Yeah, well done to you. So, but it is worth noting that I picked better on the Peasants. So maybe next week listen to my Peasants and Chris's Kings, and you'll get a good team between us. So we'll go on to the waiver section of the show now. I don't think I have a jingle for the waivers actually, so we'll just roll with it. So waivers, so general comment that week 1 is typically your best opportunity in fantasy to improve your team. It's usually the first adjustment since the draft of the things that we missed or didn't get right, or just things that just kind of have come out of nowhere. And you know, it's the biggest opportunity for you to get an impactful player on your team. That being said, it doesn't really feel like there's a clear gem or someone that the draft missed this year. There are a few nice guys. So it's going to be down to you. I'll tell you my thoughts and you'll have to translate and see how you feel as well. Be aggressive if you believe you should be aggressive on someone, but don't splash the cash or go too hard if you're not entirely convinced. Also, watch out for who people drop to. There can be, you know, some names get dropped in week 1 of people who have bad performances who could still be good for the season. So if you're not entirely convinced by the waiver options, maybe keep your priority and try and go for the claim of someone who gets dropped. As with picking your team, you want to follow usage. Usage is king. Touchdowns and big plays and things can be random. Usage you can rely on for week to week. Consistency, as much consistency as they can be in fantasy at least. So without further ado, Isaiah Likely, this isn't in order by the way, but I'll tell you how much I like the guys. Isaiah Likely obviously had the huge performance in week 1. Could have been an even bigger performance. I already kind of said that I think he could be a week in, week out usable fantasy piece this year. This could end up obviously being his best game. He's not going to get the same kind of usage because they really made a point to take away Mark Andrews and keep Zay Flowers quiet. The Chiefs' defense is good, and obviously Arrowhead's a tough place to go. But I still believe he could absolutely firmly establish himself as the kind of third best option in this team and could be a focal point. Like I said, these tight ends, when they get a bit more seasoned, get a bit older, they can be really good. So I would look to make Isaiah Likely one of your priorities for the week. Certainly if you need a tight end, absolutely go crazy for him. But even beyond that, I would probably go fairly aggressively for him. Don't go doing something silly, you know, like spending 50% or above of your budget on him. But do, if you believe in him, do what you think you need to do to get him, and that's fine. It's free money at the end of the day in most leagues. And as the year goes on, like I say, there's not necessarily guys that pop up so much. So use the money while you've got it. Alec Pierce is another good option. Like I said, it's just about getting a slice of that Colts offense. He's going to be a bit inconsistent, but if he can get on the end of some of the Anthony Richardson deep balls, he's obviously going to have some value. Again, he shouldn't really be a massive bid, but you could put a little bit of money on him. Tank Bigsby, again, he's an interesting guy. I'd add him speculatively that he has a fairly solid role in this Jags backfield. Again, don't spend too much money on him, but you could spend a little bit if you want him. A quarterback, Tua, Purdy, Stafford, if they're out there, they're reasonable options certainly for week 2. I'd take a look at those guys. If T. Higgins sits, you could maybe take a look at Andre Sovas. They play the Chiefs this week, but he should bump up to the second slot, so he could have a bit of value at least as a 1 week fill-in. Brandon Cooks as well, if this Cowboys offense passes a bit more. He had some value at spots last year as well, so look to go at him if he's out there. If you've got a reserve spot, you could add a guy like Ricky Pearsall. It's just kind of smart business, good insurance to ensure Stafford, ensure Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk when you can stash a guy for free on your reserve spot. Bucky Irving, again, definitely a guy you should go out and look to add. If his efficiency over Rashad White continues, potentially we could maybe even see a bit of a changing of the guard there. Jordan Mason obviously is an absolute must-add, certainly if you're a CMC owner. If you need an option for the next week or perhaps a couple of weeks, Again, don't spend a massive amount on him. He could be good for a week or two, but when CMC's back, he's just going to go back to obviously being a handcuff. But definitely look to him if you need a decent player. I already mentioned about Demarcus Robinson in absence of Puka Nacua for a few weeks. Again, don't go too hard on him as they may spread it around. Tyler Johnson had a big play there as well, but he figures to be the next man up, so a good option to go for. For kickers, so I have a general rule of thumb with kickers, which I suggest you follow, and I'll give you some names as well. So first and foremost, you want good weather or in a dome. That's the most important thing for a kicker. Then you look at the over-under of the game. You want a high-scoring, high over-under game. Beyond that, if there's a tiebreak or you want another metric to do on, if the team's favoured to win with these other conditions, factor that in as well. And then you can factor in if they're playing at home and actually how good the kicker themselves is as well. So kickers I like this week, Greg Zuerlein, they've got a much easier matchup against Tennessee. I say that the defense look pretty good, but if the offense is stalling, that can be good for field goals. Jake Bates and Chase McLaughlin in the Detroit-Tampa game, that could be quite a high-scoring one, so I like both those options there, and I think it's in Detroit, so it's in a dome. Carty and Prater, again, that's Arizona against the Rams, in a dome as well, should be fairly high-scoring. And then Cameron Dicker against the Panthers, not in a dome, outside the weather hopefully should be okay, but with how bad this Panthers team looked, the Chargers obviously could score a lot this week. And then on defense, I typically, just as again a bit of advice, I look to prioritize the better defenses over having a better matchup, because bad defenses are notorious for letting you down in fantasy, regardless of how good a matchup can be. So favor a good defense, but equally, if a good defense is a terrible matchup, then it's better to play the matchup. But some defenses I like this week: Seahawks against New England. This one's at New England. And obviously, if a D is at home, that can be a slight swing point as well for being a benefit. Seahawks are not at home, but I'm not willing to buy this Patriots offense is going to be as okay as it was this week. So you could take a look at them. The Commanders at home against the Giants. The Giants obviously looked awful. Not massively keen on this one because the Commanders D is terrible as well. But with how bad the Giants are, they're certainly a consideration. Chargers against Carolina, with how rough the Panthers looked, Chargers defense looks fairly good against the Raiders too. Love that one this week. Houston against Chicago, obviously that's more about Caleb. He didn't look too good there in week 1. Houston at home, they're a pretty good unit too, so that's certainly an option you can have. Kansas against Cincinnati might be a low-key option you could go with. Obviously, double down on Cincinnati having another bad week. It's in Arrowhead again, I believe, so the Kansas could be a good option for this one. Denver against Pittsburgh. Again, Denver obviously just didn't score a touchdown. Not massively keen on this one either, but it's an option there. Jacksonville against Cleveland. We obviously just saw the Cowboys clown Cleveland. So Jacksonville did a pretty good job against the Dolphins. So at home, they could take care of business here against the Browns. And then the Colts against Green Bay as well. Green Bay obviously playing Malik Willis now. No Jordan Love, even though Colts are on the road. Malik Willis is not a good quarterback, so that they also are a very good option. I believe them and the Chargers as well have some good games coming up in the weeks after this one too. So we will now go to the Thursday night preview. Okay, so Thursday night we've got Buffalo at Miami. Both these teams are 1-0. Last year Buffalo, I think, had the Dolphins number, but both teams looked a little bit sluggish, I think, out the gate. More so the Dolphins than the Bills, but the Bills definitely had the easier defensive, at least, matchup of the two. It's a key divisional battle, though. Obviously, these two both share the AFC East. Both will be looking to win the division. So, this game could focus the minds here and get their season on track. Allen should be good to go. He's practicing, even though he injured his wrist there on his non-throwing hand. I think he'll probably spread the ball around a little bit more in this one. They'll probably look to scale back his rushing a bit. It's Josh Allen. He's always going to rush. But you should get the likes of Kincaid and Shakira and Cook involved a little bit more there as well. So like all of them as options this week, go ahead and play them if you've got them. For Miami, I expect Waddle to be more in the wide receiver 2 range. He obviously had quite a big day there on Sunday. He wasn't entirely consistent last year, and obviously we know the Dolphins like to run. That being said, check the health of Achane and Mostert, because if they're both a bit banged up and not running, they might lean on this pass game a little bit more. You should probably still be starting Waddle this week. I'm just talking about how much you like Waddle. I think they will try to get the ground game going in this one if they can, though. It didn't really get going that much against the Jags. Achane could have a really big night. He could even it could be a proper thunderstorm. It could be just absolutely pouring for Achane. But absolutely check his health, because if that ankle's not right, they're going to share the load a little bit more, and he may even sit this one out on the short week. Yeah, if he's playing, you play him, I think. Yeah, just check that. For Raheem Mostert, I would, if Achane's playing here, to be honest, I would probably recommend benching him if you've got other reasonable options, just to see how this offense shakes out. He's dealing with a chest injury of his own, so again, at this point, he's looking a bit iffy for the game too. If Achane sits, absolutely play Mostert if he plays, because he should be the lead back. If both of them sit, go out and get Jeff Wilson and maybe even Jalen Wright. He was inactive in last week's game. Yeah, if Achane's playing and Mostert's playing too, I'd probably just sit Mostert in fantasy. Tua, he's a reasonable streaming option. I put him obviously in the waivers. I wouldn't expect a huge game from him, but he's definitely usable this week if you need an option at quarterback. So that's it for the Thursday night preview. We're going to have a little bit of fun here. So on the Friday show, obviously we go ahead and do the 20 questions. We're going to do that on the Friday show, but on the Tuesday show, the recap and waiver show, we're going to do the Immaculate Grid. If you don't know what the Immaculate Grid is, Google it. It's great fun. It's I'll hold up to the camera now if you're watching on YouTube. Basically, it's a grid where you have various options, and you have to pick an option that you think is right for each player. So, for example, in the first one of the day I'm doing it, you've got the Bengals and the Bears. So you need to name someone who has played for the Bengals and the Bears. From the top of my head, I can think of Cedric Benson. If you maybe remember him from your Northeast fantasy days. So he's good. You obviously want to get 9 in the Immaculate Grid, and then you obviously want to get the best score possible and see how you end up. Then we've got the Bears against the Saints. I think I can think of Jimmy Graham. Andy Dalton also played for the both of them. I think he'll be a bit better than Jimmy Graham, so I'm going to go Andy Dalton. Then we've got a Bears first round pick. That just has to be a first round pick that played for the Bears, not drafted by the Bears themselves. But I'm going to go with, I'm going to go a little rogue on this one and try and go Jay Cutler. I think he was a first round pick, 2%. That's a nice low score there. Then we've got the Bengals and the Cardinals. I'm going to go AJ Green for that one. He's the first one that springs to mind for me. He'll be better than Carson Palmer. He's a bit higher. Then we've got the Saints and the Cardinals. I definitely know Tyrann Mathieu played for both of them, as did Adrian Peterson. So I'm going to go with Adrian Peterson for this one. Oh, that was higher than I thought it would be, 25%. Then a first round pick that played for the Cardinals. I'm going to go Carson Palmer for that one. I think that's a little sneaky. Yeah, he's only 1% there. Then we've got a Bengal with a 3,000 passing yard season. You may have never heard of him. Go check him out if you haven't. Boomer Esiason. I'm going for that one. Bit more of an old school 80s quarterback there. He was 18%, so pretty good. We're going to take it back to the 70s for the Saints and the 3,000 yard passing quarterback with Archie Manning. Yes, that's the Manning of Peyton and Eli. That's his dad. And then lastly, we've got a first round draft pick with 3,000 plus yards season. For that one, I'm going to go with Drew Bledsoe. He was the first overall draft pick the year I was born with the Patriots. He is only 1%, so a nice good score there. And I had a score of 132 on the Immaculate Grid today, so pretty happy with that. If you want to let us know how you did in the Immaculate Grid, how your score compares to mine or to ours in the LOC Fantasy Show, please do email or comment and let us know. If you do want to check us out on socials, so it's LOC Fantasy, I think at most things, or it's LOC_fantasy.show. LOC Fantasy Show is the handle on most things. I really messed that up. LOC Fantasy Show. And on TikTok, it's LOC.fantasy.show. So please interact there, or on Reddit as well as LOC Fantasy Show. You can email the email address locfantasyshow@gmail.com. Please get your questions in if you have any for the preview show. We want to read out one of your questions each week for each game and see if we can help you with the fantasy advice. Obviously, let us know what you think of the show as well. The show is available obviously on YouTube. It's now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Audible as well. So please subscribe, listen wherever you want. You can get the RSS feed from the grid. From the blogger on the blog, which is again LOC Fantasy Show on Blogger, so you can find that too. Other than that, that's it for the recap show. We'll be back on Friday, and more importantly, Chris will be back on Friday to give you the Thursday night recap and the obviously week 2 preview show. But until then, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with your waivers this week. You have a nice week, and we'll talk to you again on Friday. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good week, guys.